now continue with episode 3 of the Gulf Crisis, The Road to War. Allied commanders viewing the battlefield saw the first of the surrendering Iraqis in the distance. Some appeared wounded.
We had been successful at leading the coalition all along. We did not want to suddenly, at the very end, get into the point of having to follow the coalition or being forced into doing things by a changing direction of international opinion. The instincts were to stay one step ahead, and politically we were coming up against a point where we could expect growing political resistance at home and abroad, which would then only complicate the entire post-war thinking.
We had not fully closed the ring behind the Iraqi forces, but General Schwarzkopf reported that there were perhaps, I don't remember the exact number, at most 3 divisions, still organized divisions, and that the rest was a rabble.
There was no way out for them. I mean, they could go through Basra. There were a few bridges going across El Fal. There was to the El Fal, but there was nothing else. And it was literally about to become the Battle of Cannae, a battle of annihilation.
And the analogy that became popular, and I don't know who originated it first, was an American football analogy, which was that we didn't want to be accused of piling on. Once the whistle had blown and lots of other people jumping on top of the fellow who had already been tackled.
They died on a lonely stretch of road under a blackened sky, caught in...
I am pleased to announce that at midnight tonight, Eastern Standard Time, exactly 100 hours since ground operations commenced and 6 weeks since the start of Operation Desert Storm, all United States and coalition forces will suspend offensive combat operations.
The decision was taken earlier that day, mid-afternoon, if my recollection is right. There was a meeting in the Oval Office, and the President was surrounded by his principal advisors.
The picture that would have come of the carnage on the road and fighter planes and tanks and artillery blasting people who were simply trying to get away would have left a bad taste on what was otherwise a brilliant military operation.
I was there with the President, and I can assure you, up and down the line of chain of command, there was total unanimity and consensus that all military objectives had been achieved.
And the President, made the decision that, that we should stop at a given time, at a given place. That did leave some escape routes open for them to get back out, and I think it was a very humane decision and a very courageous decision on his part also.
And if it turns out that maybe another 24, 48 hours if we'd gone on, yes, we probably could have destroyed, or would have destroyed, another 100, 200 pieces of artillery and armor. My question is, so what militarily? Not clear to me it would have really meant that much. And against what cost? In human life, against what cost politically?
Saddam sent a crew of his generals to hear the Allied ceasefire terms and to keep an eye on each other.
While our commanders had originally demanded the grounding of all aircraft, both fixed-wing and rotary helicopters, the Iraqi generals came back and said, "You've devastated our transportation system. The bridges are all down. We can't drive any place. Could we please continue to use helicopters for purposes of internal administration and to move people from one place to another?" And the commander at the talks gave his approval to that. It sounded like a reasonable request.
I think I was suckered, because I think they intended right then when they asked that question to use those helicopters against the insurrections that were going on. I think that absolutely was their intention. Again, personal opinion, but I just, as I say, they suckered me.
The sound of the battle for Kirkuk, a fight which the rebels have been losing and in which thousands of civilians have been dying. Those who've managed to flee tell of bodies piled high at the roadside. In the distance, we could see Iraqi helicopter gunships, which have, according to the refugees, been firing quite indiscriminately at anything which moves.
Most of the damage and most of the harm being done to the Kurds and the Shia were, in fact, being done by ground forces, by artillery and armored personnel carriers and so forth.
Helicopters destroyed us. I don't know. They saw this, but they don't know. Why? We are human like you.
To go in and try and knock down those helicopters would inexorably get us involved in trying to deal with the internal political situation in Iraq and potentially involve us in efforts to get rid of Saddam and so on.
Mr. George Bush is responsible for all this. He could destroy Saddam and his army, but he just tried.
If even our own ground forces had gone on to Baghdad, we probably would not have been able to capture Saddam. We had don't forget, the same group of people had been through this experience with General Noriega in a much smaller country and a much less competent military and security service. And so the idea of chasing him all around Iraq and the idea of having to occupy Iraq and administer it and deal with all these problems was anathema.
All those who are critical of us for having stopped too soon all assume that it would have been a piece of cake. We could have walked into Baghdad on Tuesday. On Wednesday, we could have restored created democratic government. And Thursday, we could have left with 18 million people reading the Federalist Papers. It wouldn't have worked that way necessarily. Odds are not.
Do you feel cheated that Saddam Hussein is still in power?
If the world had done what it should have done in 1936 or 1938, someone might have felt cheated that Hitler was still in power. They wouldn't have known of the tens of millions of people whose lives have been spared from World War II, and I think we've accomplished, maybe not on that scale, but something similar, and that has to be remembered.
Saddam Hussein was defeated. He was discredited. Everybody in the region knows that. Iraq is not a military threat right now, and the radicals in the rest of the region have drawn that lesson.
The Persian Gulf War was a crushing military defeat for Iraq, leaving Saddam Hussein in a much weakened state. On March 1st, 1991, Kuwait was liberated. A nation returned to its people. Order your collector's edition video of all 3 programs of the Gulf Crisis series on video cassette by calling 1-800-544-1803. Have your Visa or MasterCard ready. Operators are standing by.
England's finest documentaries have arrived on the Discovery Channel. Each week, Margot Kidder explores the complexities of nature and history, bringing you the best of the BBC. Join her Sundays at 8 Eastern.